They laughed the night I broke, not because I failed a mission, not because I froze, but because the people I trusted most decided I was worthless the moment I stopped being useful to them. I remember standing there, blood still drying on my hands, begging for one honest answer. Instead, they turned their backs, and the man in charge smirked like my pain was entertainment. That was the night Ella Perez ceased to exist, and the name they once feared became the name I swore I'd bury forever. Night Fox. I thought I could outrun that betrayal. I thought silence would protect me. I was wrong. The base was already alive when I slipped into the east wing, my old tablet tucked under my arm, its chipped edges tapping lightly against my side. The hum of servers vibrated through the walls, steady and predictable, exactly how I wanted the day to be. Nothing dramatic, nothing demanding, just a quiet morning where I could finish my tasks, keep my head down, and leave without anyone remembering I'd been there at all. I walked the corridor in my gray civilian uniform, hair pulled back low, blending into the muted palette of the building. People in uniform rushed past with purpose, trading clipped orders and updates from morning briefings. Not one of them paused to look at me. Oddly enough, that anonymity had become my anchor. Being invisible meant being untouched, safe. Coronado suited me for that reason. The ocean breeze softened even the harshest days, and the sheer volume of activity on base made it easy for someone like me to simply fade into the background. Sometimes an entire week went by without a single person using my name. I'd grown to appreciate the distance. As I rounded the main corridor, the sharp cadence of boots flooded in from the opposite end. A full formation of SEAL officers approached, their footsteps synchronized and thunderous. Instinctively, I stepped aside, letting their momentum sweep past me. None of them spared me a glance. My thoughts drifted to the northern server room, then to Mateo and how he'd slept. Uneven, tense. I hoped to finish early and get home before his anxiety spiked again. I didn't know it yet, but this was the last ordinary moment I'd have for a very long time. The main hallway was unusually crowded that morning. A long line of SEAL officers moving in tight formation after their briefing. Instinct kicked in before I could think. I shifted to the wall, angled just enough to keep both the path and the nearest exit in view. My breathing steadied into a familiar pattern. 4 counts in, 4 held, 4 out. I hadn't meant to slip into it. It simply rose from somewhere deeper. Older. That was when I felt eyes on me. Daniel Brooks stood a few feet away, caught in the moving tide of uniforms but somehow still. He wasn't looking at me the way others did, through me or past me, but directly at the way I carried myself. His gaze moved from my shoulders to the placement of my feet, then to the angle of my body as I shifted weight. It was the kind of assessment that belonged in secured rooms, not in a busy hallway. I turned away too fast, like closing a door someone had already stepped through. It didn't matter. He had seen it. A stray cable lay on the floor, and as I crouched to pick it up, an officer bumped my shoulder hard enough to knock a wrench loose from my pocket. Before the metal hit the ground, my hand shot out and caught it. Reflex, not thought. The conversation around us faltered for a heartbeat. I slid the wrench back into my pocket and kept walking, refusing to acknowledge the moment. Yet when I passed Brooks, I heard a quiet exhale escape him, an unmistakable sound of recognition, as if a theory he wasn't ready to believe had just gained weight. I didn't know he'd once glimpsed an SCI file for 90 seconds, a file with details he wasn't meant to absorb but couldn't quite forget. Something in that fleeting image had just crossed in front of him in a gray civilian uniform. I walked faster. Whatever he thought he saw, I prayed it would fade. But deep down, I knew better. By midday, half the technical wing was stalled under flashing red simulation alarms. The fire training system had glitched badly enough to halt operations, and I was called to handle it. The moment I studied the parameters, I knew it hadn't broken on its own. Someone had tampered with it, subtly enough to avoid suspicion, deliberately enough to watch how I'd respond. Brooks stood among the crowd gathering around the console, and beside him, far more concerning, was Rear Admiral Mason Kerr. Kerr rarely visited this wing. Today, he seemed entertained by the chaos. He folded his arms, watching me with the lazy confidence of someone certain he wouldn't be surprised. "Go on, Perez. Show us something. I didn't want to." Attention was dangerous, but the system wasn't going to reset itself, and letting it escalate would only draw more eyes. I set my tablet down, scanned the grid, adjusted 3 faulty inputs, cut the auxiliary line, restarted the data feed, and overrode the faulty sensor. 12 seconds. Red lights flicked to green. A hush swept through the room. A whisper followed. "No civilian does that." Kerr's smirk deepened, but Brooks's expression changed, sharper, more certain, as though the missing pieces in his mind had finally aligned. Before I could step away, Harper Cole strode forward with a tactical drone cradled in his hands. Known for arrogance, he wore that reputation easily. "Do it again, if you can." I took the drone without a word, dismantled it, separated every component, reset the navigation locks, then reassembled it with muscle memory I wished I didn't still have. Curiosity thickened into unease. Cole stepped back half a pace, visibly unsettled, like he'd just witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible. And in that instant, the quiet life I had built began to fracture. Because what they saw couldn't be unseen, and the questions forming behind their eyes were the kind that never died quietly. I hoped the drone incident would fade if I stayed quiet long enough. People forget fast on a base this busy. At least, that's what I told myself. But men like Rear Admiral Mason Kerr don't forget when their authority is scratched, especially not by someone they consider beneath them. By Wednesday, I walked into the tech bay expecting a normal morning. Instead, the console lit up the second my fingertips brushed it. Unauthorized access attempt. Level black. My chest tightened. Someone had tried breaching the motion-encoded partition, a method so specialized only individuals with exposure to highly classified equipment would even know existed. On this base, only one man had the authority, and the ego, to order that level of intrusion. Kerr stepped behind me before I could move, his presence loud even in silence. "Perez, interesting logs this morning. What exactly are you hiding in our system?" I steadied my tablet, refusing to give him the satisfaction of flinching. "Sir, nothing in this division belongs to me." He smiled like he already owned the truth. "We'll see about that." He summoned half the bay staff, turning the room into a stage. Then he unveiled a Level 6 ComSec module, the kind rumored to be impossible to open without specialized clearance. The challenge in his eyes was deliberate. "Open it. If you're so talented, I knew better. I also knew how to open it." 19 seconds later, the module clicked and unfolded. Silence swept through the room like a held breath snapping tight. "No way," someone murmured. Cole stared at me, trying to connect me to a name he didn't dare say. Brooks watched from the wall, arms crossed, gaze sharpened into recognition. He didn't need confirmation anymore. Then, Kerr made the mistake that detonated everything. He walked to the central console and entered a command to access my personnel file. The lights slammed to red. An alarm cut through the room. National security breach. Authority level exceeded. Every head turned toward him, but only I understood what he had triggered. My file wasn't supposed to exist here, and now the federal government knew someone tried to open it. The life I built, quiet, invisible, safe, fractured in a single keystroke. An hour later, a black helicopter descended onto the training field, the rotor wash sweeping dust across the windows. The base fell into a stunned stillness. SOCOM never arrived without reason. I sat locked inside the tech bay when the door burst open. General Elias Monroe stepped in with 2 counterintelligence officers. His presence alone told everyone this wasn't a malfunction. It was a breach of the highest order. He didn't look at Kerr first. He looked at me. "Ms. Perez, we need to talk. Now." I rose, hearing only the thud of my boots on the floor. Kerr tried to intercept, but Monroe silenced him with a lift of his hand. "Admiral Kerr, You triggered an SCI alarm when you accessed her file. Sit down. The room went still. Kerr obeyed. Monroe brought me into a windowless room where truths had weight and consequences. I'm opening this file. You may remain silent. He entered a 3-star code. The device decrypted slowly, almost cruelly. I closed my eyes. Then the screen revealed the name and past I'd spent 7 years burying. Captain Ella Perez, United States Marine Forces, Special Operations Ghost Response Unit, call sign, Night Fox status, disavowed retired, classified. The air froze. Brooks whispered. I knew it. Cole stared like the world had tilted. Kerr went pale, and Monroe delivered the blow I wasn't prepared for. Ella. Ghost response may be gone, but Night Fox is still needed. In that moment, I understood. I could no longer run from who I had been. The dim briefing room felt colder with every passing second. Monroe, Brooks, and 2 counterintelligence officers waited in a silence thick enough to press against my ribs. My exposed file sat like a live charge between us. Night Fox no longer a name in the dark, but a truth none of them could unsee. Monroe finally spoke, voice steady with a weight I recognized too well. Ella, Ghost Response Unit is gone, but your capabilities aren't, and we need you, now. I stared at my hands, remembering the years they moved through shadows with precision I've spent so long trying to forget. I left for a reason. General. Monroe tilted his head, reading more than my words. Mateo! My stomach clenched. They weren't supposed to reach that far into my life. But Monroe continued. Clinical and calm. Your brother's PTSD after Paradise. You're the only family he has left. They had dug exactly where I never wanted anyone to look. I breathed through the sting, grounding myself. I'm not going back into that darkness. I've paid enough. Brooks shifted, torn between understanding and duty. Monroe exhaled like a man who wished he didn't have to say the next part. The intel team trapped in Yemen. Lieutenant Harper Cole is among them. I lifted my head. Cole! The same officer who mocked me, who treated my skills like a curiosity. I'm not returning to save him. Monroe leaned forward. All business. You're not saving him. You're saving the intel he was carrying. If it leaks, undercover personnel across the region die. You're the only living operative who knows that compound. The room tightened around me. Ghosts of old missions flickered like heat rising off asphalt. Then Brooks spoke softly. Ella, if you don't go, they won't make it. I closed my eyes. Mateo's trembling hands, his voice calling my name in the dark. All of it clawed its way up my throat. My phone buzzed. A message from our neighbor. Mateo is panicking. He keeps asking for you. My heart split clean down the center. I stood abruptly. I need to be with my brother. After that, I'll give you my answer. That night, I stayed at Mateo's side, watching him curl into himself like he was bracing for flames only he could see. You're not leaving, right? I'm here, Mateo. The answer hurt more than the lie itself. Once he finally drifted to sleep, I stepped outside. The phone buzzed again, Monroe's message waiting. Ella, sending the report. The compound matches the one you infiltrated years ago. If you decline, we lose them. The rendered tunnels, collapse points, and wind shafts pulled me backward through time. Another message arrived. They issued a 36-hour ultimatum, execution if unmet. Cold settled in my chest. Brooks called next. If anyone else goes, they die. Before I could answer, Mateo jolted awake, screaming my name, begging me not to let the fire take me. I held him until his shaking eased, but the pull between 2 worlds was tearing me apart. Then, an anonymous, encrypted email lit up my screen. Kerr knew the intel team walked into a trap. He blocked the report. Their capture is on him. I froze. Cole hadn't just stumbled into danger. Kerr put him there. I looked at Mateo, then at the screen, and the voice I'd buried for years rose inside me, steady and cold. You've run long enough. Tomorrow, Monroe would have my answer. We landed in Yemen at 0146, heat slicing across my face the instant the ramp dropped. No lights, no markers, Only the hiss of sand and the quiet footsteps of Brooks, Ryland, and Mason falling in behind me. No one asked if I was ready. They already knew the answer didn't matter. The entrance to the old wind tunnel was half collapsed, whispering danger with every shift of sand. When a faint scrape echoed, my body reacted before my mind, spinning, scanning, remembering everything I fought to forget. Then part of the ceiling crashed down. The only way forward was an 18-inch gap. Monroe's words rang in my head. No one else can lead them through. I dropped to the ground and crawled in. Air thick with burnt oil and dust. Brooks whispered behind me. Steady and certain. "We're with you, Fox. 600 meters in." My fingers brushed a double-charge pressure trap. I halted the team just as Ryland clipped a decoy line. I yanked him back before it snapped. We reached the cell. Cole lay curled on the floor, barely breathing. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Perez!" "No." "Night Fox? Stand up if you want to live." As I lifted him, he whispered the truth. Kerr knew. He ignored the intel. Gunfire erupted. A mine blast threw me sideways. Mason dragged me up, shouting, "Fox! Move!" We escaped at dawn, and in the roar of the rotors, I felt it settle. Night Fox was fully, irrevocably awake. 3 days later, I walked into the Naval Inquiry Chamber with nothing on my shoulders. Not a uniform, not a rank, not a past I was willing to hide anymore. Just me. Across the room sat Kerr, still wearing the insignia of a Rear Admiral, but none of the authority that once clung to him like a second skin. Cole was positioned to my left, head-wrapped, bruises dark along his cheekbone, the weight of what he survived etched into every slow breath he took. Monroe called the room to order. "We will begin with the evidence." The lights dimmed, and the first video appeared on the screen. Grainy footage from the hidden camera in Cole's cell. His voice, weak but unmistakably clear, filled the chamber. I warned Kerr about the intel trap. He dismissed it. Kerr shot to his feet, outrage cracking through whatever composure he had left. "Lies! I never saw—" Monroe cut him off by dropping a folder onto the table with a sharp slap. Inside was an email dated 7 years back, signed by Kerr himself. "Ignore her report. I won't let Night Fox embarrass me again." Silence fell so heavy, it might as well have been another accusation. Kerr's eyes locked onto mine, wild and unsteady. "This is your fault. You shouldn't exist." I steadied my breath, refusing to let his desperation bleed into me. "I exist to save lives, not to cover your mistakes." Brooks stood then, the scrape of his chair cutting through the room. "Sir, Perez saved all of us. And if Kerr hadn't ignored her intel, Cole wouldn't have been captured." Another piece of the truth landed. Then counterintelligence produced the final blow, an audio file, corrupted and restored. Kerr's voice unmistakably clear beneath the static. "I'm not letting some ghost unit reject ruin my reputation. We bury this." The words seemed to rip the last thread, holding Kerr upright. He collapsed into his chair, shoulders caving as if the truth itself had crushed him. Monroe turned to me. "Ella Perez, you are no longer bound by any recall order. I am granting you permanent honorable release. No one has the authority to pull you back into the field, ever again." My knees loosened, not from weakness, but from relief so sharp it felt like breath returning after years underwater. For the first time in a very long time, the weight I carried wasn't mine anymore. I returned to San Diego that afternoon with a weight sliding off my shoulders in slow, unfamiliar pieces. Mateo was already at the doorway, waiting like he'd been listening for my footsteps all day. He didn't ask where I'd been or why I left so suddenly. He just wrapped his arms around me, holding on with the kind of trust that cuts straight through all the noise. "I knew you'd come back," he whispered. That night we ate in quiet simplicity. 2 plates, soft conversation, the comfort of routine. No sirens, no mission briefings, no echo of gunfire lingering in the back of my mind. Just home. Just us. Survivors in different ways, learning to breathe again. Weeks passed, and the world slowly adjusted around me. One morning, I sat on Coronado Beach, laptop balanced on my knees, the wind cold enough to sting. I opened a blank document and stared at the blinking cursor before typing the first words of the life I finally chose to own. Chapter 1. The Cost of Silence. Messages trickled in. Cole sent one that was awkward but earnest, thanking me for pulling him out, for proving every assumption he'd made about me wrong. Brooks visited a few times, always with a coffee in hand. He never lingered long. But one morning, he stood beside me, looking out at the water, and said, "Ella, fox or not, you're the best person I've ever served with." The words settled gently, unexpected, grounding. I carried them with me. As for Kerr, his fall was swift. His rank stripped, investigations opened, his influence evaporating like it had never been real. But my story was never meant to orbit around the ruins of his choices. This chapter, this life, belonged to me. I walked the shoreline at sunset, listening to the waves pulse against the sand with steady, patient rhythm. For the first time in years, there was no mission chasing me, no past dragging nails down my spine. Only breath, only space. I closed my eyes and let the truth rise inside me like a tide finally turning. Night, fox. Rest. I can take it from here. When I opened my eyes, the sea stretched wide and waiting, and I stepped forward as Ella, wholly, freely, finally, 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 finally,